Through the window of Magnolia Quay Coffee, 3 of America's most expensive supercars sat at the curb. A Hennessy Venom 5, a Chinger 21C, a Ford GT Mark IV. Adrienne Whitlock never glanced twice. The man across her table was black, in faded gray flannel, a smear of grease near one wrist. A poor single father, the matchmaker had warned. The date was set for 2 o'clock. 11 minutes in, she stood. "I have a meeting." Her heels clicked past the floor, past the window, past 3 supercars. She walked between them. She did not know they were his. 32 stories above East Bay Street, Adrienne Whitlock signed the last page of the Beaufort Resort acquisition and slid the contract across her desk. Her assistant gathered it without a word. Adrienne's phone vibrated face down on the leather. She turned it over, already knowing. "Mother." The message was short and pointed. 2 o'clock, Magnolia Quay. Carter has arranged it. He is a Charleston gentleman. Do not embarrass me again. Adrienne closed her eyes for half a second. It was board review week. There were 3 properties under federal compliance review, and a Singapore acquisition pending on the same docket. She could not afford another open argument with her family. Not now. Not over a blind date she had not asked for, and had no margin to navigate. She told her assistant to push the 4 o'clock call across town and walk to the elevator without changing her blouse. 12 miles to the west, in a converted brick warehouse on the marsh side of Meeting Street Extension, Marcus Reeve had been kneeling beside a Hennessy Venom 5 since 5 o'clock that morning. The bonnet was up. A Japanese collector, named Hiroshi Tanaka, had waited 2 years for the calibration to be finished by hand. Marcus moved the torque wrench a quarter turn and rechecked the dial. Each setting had to be entered by hand into a leather-bound logbook that would travel with the car for the rest of its life. The book lay open on the bench. 41 entries since sunrise. Naomi sat on a tall stool beside him, swinging her legs, drawing with colored pencils. 3 cars and a son. She held it up. Marcus nodded once, the corner of his mouth lifting, and went back to the dial. His shop foreman appeared at the bay door, a man in his 50s with hands as scarred as the engine blocks he handled. "You have that thing at 2, boss," Marcus exhaled. 3 years since Eleanor. 3 years since he had agreed to anything that involved a tablecloth and a stranger across it. He had said yes only because Eleanor's college roommate had asked, and her family knew the matchmaker. And the matchmaker had said the woman was a serious person who deserved a serious meeting. None of that felt like reason enough. He went anyway. He dropped Naomi at her grandmother's house on Trad Street, kissed the top of her head, and climbed back into the 1998 Ford pickup. He did not go home. The flannel was clean enough. The grease near his right cuff would not come out in 5 minutes. At that same hour, 3 delivery drivers from Reeve Coachworks were inching down East Bay Street with 3 customer vehicles, bound for the discreet showroom on the back lot. The Hennessy, the Chinger, the Ford GT Mark IV. A street festival on Vendu Range had blocked the usual route. The lead driver radioed the shop and asked permission to wait at the curb in front of Magnolia Quay until the parade traffic cleared. Marcus, 12 miles away, gave the clearance without looking up from the dial. He had a standing rule. He did not let customers see him sitting in their own cars. He did not let his name appear on his own logos. He did not advertise. The work spoke. The wait list spoke. He did not need to. The 3 drivers nosed the supercars into the curb and killed their engines. Tourists with phones gathered on the sidewalk. The drivers stayed in their seats with the windows up. No selfies, no photographs, exactly as Marcus required of every delivery. None of them noticed the black man in the gray flannel walking past on the far side of the street, hands in his pockets, 10 minutes early for a blind date he had not wanted to take. Marcus did not see his own cars. He saw the door of the coffee shop. He took a breath. He pulled the handle and walked in. Adrienne had arrived first. She took the table by the window because Camille Beaumont, the manager, had gestured her there without asking. The light was good. The street was busy. She glanced at the slim Cartier on her wrist. 2 o'clock exactly. The 3 supercars at the curb, registered only as obstructions to her line of sight. A small inconvenience and an otherwise serviceable view of East Bay Street. Marcus walked in. Faded gray flannel, the seam at the elbow worn soft from years of bending over engine bays. A smear of grease near his right cuff. Black. A small, calm smile that did not ask for anything. Adrian's first thought was not anger. It was certainty. Carter had sent her a black mechanic on purpose. A small, mean joke at her expense. A double insult dressed up as a setup. A test to see whether she would push back or sit down politely. Her mother had been laughing about Charleston decency for 40 years, while the family used that decency as a fence. Adrian let the family voice speak inside her before her own had time to form the question. Marcus pulled out the chair across from her. He started to say something about his daughter. He was going to mention that she liked piano, and that her teacher had given her a new piece that morning. He never got the chance. 11 minutes in, between a cup of coffee that arrived and a cup of coffee that was not touched, Adrian stood. I have a meeting. Her voice was even professional. The voice of a woman who had ended thousands of conversations in exactly that register. Marcus did not stand. He nodded once, gently, and turned toward Camille at the counter. Put hers on my tab, please. Thank you. Adrian did not hear him. She walked past the table, past the window, past the 3 supercars at the curb. She did not look up. She slid into the back of the waiting Range Rover and told her driver to take her back to the tower. The Cartier read 211. Inside the coffee shop, Marcus sat for another moment with his hands flat on the table. The cappuccino in front of him had gone lukewarm. Through the window, he watched the 3 drivers in the cars at the curb get their second radio clearance. One by one, the engines came alive, low and clean and tuned, and the 3 supercars eased away from the curb in a single unhurried convoy. Heading back toward the showroom on the Marsh side, Marcus took a slow sip of the cappuccino. He set down $40 on the bench beside him for a check of $7. Camille came over with the receipt. She did not pretend not to have seen. Mr. Reeve. That was the 4th time this year. I'm sorry on her behalf. Marcus shook his head once. Don't be. She doesn't know. Camille hesitated. Doesn't know what, sir? Marcus looked out at the curb where the 3 supercars had been. He smiled, just barely. Any of it. He stood, folded the receipt, slid it into his shirt pocket, and walked out into the afternoon light. He did not go back to the warehouse right away. He drove the pickup 3 blocks south, parked along the seawall, and sat for 10 minutes watching the harbor and a tugboat working a barge slow toward the bend in the river. He thought about Naomi on the high stool with the colored pencils. He thought about Eleanor in the photograph on the mezzanine wall. He did not think about Adrian Whitlock again for the rest of the day. He had been raised by a father who said the only response to a closed door was to keep your shoulders down and walk past it. He had been called things much worse than mechanic, in rooms much more important than this one. He drove back to the shop and put on his coveralls. The Venom 5 was waiting. Tanaka had been patient. So would he. The next morning, Adrian sat across from her mother and Carter Linden in the corner booth of the Sycamore Club. The Sycamore had been the family's table since her grandmother's day. The waiters knew everyone by name. The grapefruit was still cut into wedges with the membranes removed by hand, the way her grandfather had insisted on for 50 years. She kept the report brief. The meeting had not been a good fit. Her mother sighed. There aren't many decent men left in Charleston, Adrian. Especially, well, you know what I mean. Constance Whitlock did not finish sentences when she did not have to. The unsaid half hung in the air the way it had hung in this room for 60 years. Adrian, let it pass. Carter smiled thinly over the rim of his coffee. I did warn you. A mechanic. A single father. You shouldn't have expected more. He stirred his cup. Don't take it personally. The matchmaker meant well. She was trying to be modern. Adrian registered the word modern. She did not respond to it. She finished her grapefruit. She paid the check because her mother had stopped reaching for checks at restaurants 20 years ago, and she went back to the office without saying another word at the table. At noon, she returned to Magnolia K Coffee for a working lunch with 2 clients from Singapore. Camille recognized her at the door and walked her to the same window table she had left less than 24 hours earlier. Adrian did not register the choice until the menus were set down. The Singapore meeting ran 60 minutes and ended in a handshake. As the clients left, Adrian caught Camille's eye and gestured her closer. She asked, in the polite tone she used for small inquiries, about the man in the gray flannel from the day before. Camille paused for half a second. Then she answered in a voice she had clearly measured beforehand. "Mr. Reeve has been a regular here for 12 years, Miss Whitlock. He has a standing table, this one." Adrian set her cup down. "Reeve, I'm not at liberty to say more, ma'am." Camille inclined her head. She did not look away. She did not apologize. Adrian paid the bill. She did not finish the espresso. Back at the tower, she pulled out her phone and typed Reeve Charleston into the search bar. The first result was a black landing page with a single line of white text. Reeve Coachworks by invitation only. No phone, no address, no images. The second result was a Forbes profile from 2017, referring to an unnamed atelier near Charleston that restored and refined the most exclusive American hypercars in private hands. The reporter had not been allowed inside the building. The shop owner had agreed to one phone call lasting 11 minutes, on the condition that no name be printed. Adrian read the line twice. 11 minutes. She called Daniel Ng, her head of brand marketing. "The Ford GT in the Kiowa Island campaign last year. Where did it come from?" Daniel answered, without hesitation. "Reeve Coachworks. They lent it to us." "No fee." The owner said he respected the Whitlock name. "Said he knew your grandmother." Adrian was quiet. "Should I pull it from the rotation?" Daniel asked. "No," she said. "Send me every image we have of it." The folder opened on her screen. 12 frames. A matte coupe parked at the curve of the hotel drive. The river behind it. The magnolias in full bloom. Adrian zoomed in on the rear quarter. She had walked past that car the day before. She had walked between two others, just like it. She set the phone face down on the desk. 12 years of regular table. A car in her own flagship campaign. A line of customers a Forbes reporter was not allowed to photograph. She was not angry. The feeling at the base of her spine was colder than anger. It was the recognition of having stepped on something fragile without knowing it was there. For 2 days, Adrian did not call. She did not write. She did not ask her assistant to find a number. She moved through 3 board prep sessions and a press briefing with the composure that her training school had drilled into her at 21, and she did not let anyone see what she was doing in the half hour between meetings. She was reading. She was reading old motor trade publications, archived collector magazines, 2 SEC filings on a parent holding company in Delaware. She was building a picture. On Thursday morning, she canceled a board prep session, told her assistant to clear 2 hours, and drove herself to the address a private investigator she trusted had finally pulled. The warehouse sat on the marsh side of Charleston, off Meeting Street Extension, half a mile down a private gravel road. Red brick, 3 stories, a wrought iron gate, hand-forged, with a pattern of looping vines and small forged leaves she would later see again in a child's book. A small bronze plate beside the gate. Reeve Coachworks established 2009. No phone, no buzzer. The gate opened when her tires crossed a sensor in the gravel. Inside, the air was cool and clean as an operating room. Concrete floors polished to a low sheen. 6 hypercars in various stages of disassembly. An SSC Tuatara stripped to the chassis. A Saleen 7 with 1 door off. 2 Ford GTs. A Chinger lifted on a custom rig. 18 technicians in charcoal coveralls moved among them. Adrian noted, almost reflexively, the racial mix on the floor. Black, white, Latino, Asian men and women. A working ratio that did not happen by accident in a southern atelier. It happened because someone had decided. No music. Only the click of torque wrenches and the soft pneumatic hiss of an airline. Marcus was kneeling beside a 12-cylinder engine with the cylinder head off. He looked up when she stepped in. He showed no surprise. He stood. He wiped his hands on a clean rag. He gestured her forward. He did not ask why she was there. He did not ask for an apology. He walked her through the floor as he would walk any prospective client. He explained build times, The protocol for matching paint to a customer's exact yacht livery, the wait list, the standing rule that every restoration was returned with the original factory toolkit, replaced by a hand-finished set engraved with the customer's initials. He did not give her a single client name. Up a steel staircase to a mezzanine office. A plain oak desk. 2 photographs on the wall. One black and white. A woman with long hair laughing into a wind. 2 years before the diagnosis. Eleanor. Beside it, a smaller frame. Naomi at 4 years old, sitting on the hood of a Ford GT, both legs swinging, the kind of photograph a father keeps in his line of sight, so he does not forget what the work is for. Adrian's throat was dry. She made herself ask the only question that mattered. Why didn't you say anything that day? Marcus did not look at her. He looked at the photograph of Eleanor because you had already decided. I'm not used to arguing with other people's decisions. There was no edge in his voice. No injury. If he had been angry, she could have apologized. The absence of anger was the harder thing. She stood at the desk for a long moment without speaking. The wrought iron pattern on the gate downstairs would not leave her mind. She had seen looping vines like that in a Gullah Geechee craft book her grandmother had given her at 8. She had not thought of that book in 30 years, and she was suddenly certain it was still on the shelf in her library at home, behind the law books, exactly where she had left it. A door opened downstairs. Naomi's voice, quick and high, talking to her nanny. School had let out. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time and stopped at the office door when she saw Adrian. Hi. Naomi looked from her father to the woman in the gray suit. Are you Daddy's customer? Adrian could not speak for a second. She nodded. Naomi reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper folded in half. She crossed the room and handed it to Adrian very seriously, the way another child might hand over a passport. I drew it the day Daddy went for coffee. 3 cars and a son. Adrian held it in both hands. The drawing was careful. The cars were the right colors. The sun was a soft circle in the upper corner with 3 lines of light reaching down across the page. The child had drawn the 3 supercars from memory, in the right order. She thanked the girl. Naomi smiled and ran off to find her nanny. Adrian and Marcus walked down the staircase in silence. At the gate, she turned. She started to say something. Marcus shook his head once, very slightly. You don't owe me that, Miss Whitlock. She drove herself home. She laid the drawing on the passenger seat. She did not fold it. She did not put it in her bag. At a red light on King Street, she looked at it for a long time before the light changed. 2 more lights. She looked again. The sun had 3 lines coming down. The middle one fell across her hand on the steering wheel as the light turned green. By the end of that week, Carter Linden had heard. His assistant mentioned it offhand, the way she mentioned all gossip. In a half-whisper, while she set down the morning binder, the CEO had driven out to a private workshop on Meeting Street Extension. 2 hours. Did not say where she was going. Carter set down his pen. The color drained from his face for reasons that had nothing to do with romance. 3 years earlier, one of his shell companies, Linden Coastal Holdings LLC, had attempted to commission a restoration at Reeve Coachworks. The shop had returned the deposit and declined the order. The reason given in the polite letter was irregular payment routing. Marcus Reeve had not pursued it further, but he had kept the file. Carter knew because he had been told by a contact in Reeve's legal office 2 months later that the documentation remained on a shelf, indexed by date. He had assumed the file would die on that shelf. Now the CEO of Whitlock Hospitality had driven out to the same building, and the shelf was, in his mind, suddenly the loudest object in Charleston. He picked up his phone and called Harrison Pope, a senior board member he had cultivated over 3 winters of charity dinners and 1 shared box at the Symphony. I'm worried about Adrian. I'm hearing she may be entangled with a local vendor. We should be careful. He let the silence sit. He did not say more than that for a moment. Then, softer, as if it were an afterthought, given his background, he let the sentence trail. Pope cleared his throat on the other end. He understood. He had been trained, by the same generation of mothers, to understand exactly what was meant when a sentence was left to trail. A week later, Adrian sent Marcus a formal invitation to the Whitlock annual fundraiser at the Charleston Place Ballroom. The wording placed him as a vehicle partner for the brand campaign. It was the most polite apology she could draft, without writing the word. She had her assistant deliver it by hand to the warehouse gate. The envelope was cream linen. The matchmaker's name was not on it. Her mother's name was not on it, only her own, signed at the bottom in dark green ink. She did not call to confirm whether he would attend. She put the matter aside and waited. Marcus came. He brought Naomi. She wore a pale blue dress and brought a book on antebellum architecture. She found a velvet bench in the corner of the ballroom, opened the book on her knees, and stayed there for the next hour, looking up only when a server brought her a glass of water and a small plate of fruit. Marcus stationed himself at a tall table near the long windows, sipping seltzer, exchanging brief nods with two of the older bankers, who recognized him from somewhere they could not quite place. Carter found him within 10 minutes. He had brought a Hong Kong real estate developer over by the elbow, and this, Carter said with the practiced lightness he used at parties, is Mr. Reeve, a charming local mechanic Adrian has been helping out. The word helping was pressed lightly. The developer offered a polite handshake. Marcus smiled, nodded, did not correct the framing. He had stood in worse rooms. He had stood in rooms where the framing was much worse than that. 20 minutes later, the room turned. Hiroshi Tanaka walked in, the Tokyo collector who had waited 2 years for his Venom 5. He saw Marcus from across the floor, set his champagne down on a passing tray, crossed the parquet with quick, precise steps, and bowed deeply. Reeve-sensei, this is my honor. He held the bow a beat longer than was customary. The Hong Kong developer turned to Carter and asked mildly who Mr. Reeve was. Carter did not answer. A woman from Geneva named Eve Marchand answered for him from 2 steps away. He is the only man in America I trust with my car. 2-year waitlist. I have been on it since November. She extended a hand to Marcus directly. It is good to see you again. Marcus returned the greeting without flourish. A small circle of guests had begun to form around them. 3 more bowed. 2 shook hands. 1 took a small step back, as if to give the space the respect it now seemed to deserve. Adrian stood 3 steps away. She had been watching Marcus. After Tanaka's bow, she did not watch Marcus. She watched Carter, and for the first time she saw him clearly, not as a difficult colleague, not as an overreaching COO with too much access to her father's old contracts, but as a man who had used the casual prejudice of every room he had ever walked into as a working tool, the way a mason uses a trowel. He had built whole years of his career out of small slights left in trail. He had laid that bricklayer's pattern across her own family for so long that her mother had learned to speak inside it. Toward the end of the evening, Naomi slipped through the crowd and tugged the hem of Adrian's sleeve. Do you want to see what I drew tonight? Adrian knelt down. Naomi showed her a page of the architecture book, the corner folded over a hand-drawn copy of a wrought iron gate. The pattern was the gate from the warehouse. I think you would like a gate like this on your building. Adrian touched the page lightly. Which building? Naomi looked at her, surprised. The one you're going to build. Adrian glanced up at Marcus, who was watching them from across the room. He was not smiling. He was simply watching, the way a man watches something he does not want to disturb. She closed the book gently, set it back on the bench beside the girl, and stood up straighter than she had stood all evening. Across the room, Constance Whitlock had also been watching. She had not crossed to her daughter. She had not crossed to Mr. Reeve, but she had watched the bow from Tanaka, and she had watched her daughter kneel beside a child she had not been introduced to, and listen with attention. She had not given a child since she had stopped giving it to Adrian. Constance set her glass down on a passing tray. She left through the side door, 10 minutes before her car was scheduled. Carter left first. He did not say goodnight to Adrian. Marcus offered to drive her somewhere she could breathe. He did not phrase it that way. He said, "There is a car in the lot that needs one last test run before delivery. You could ride along." It was the Ford GT Mark IV, going to a client in Naples in the morning. Marcus had not let anyone but his lead engineer take it out yet. Naomi was already on her way to her grandmother's house with the nanny, half asleep against the seatbelt, her architecture book clutched to her chest. Adrian got in. They drove south out of the peninsula, through Mount Pleasant, across the bridge to James Island, down Folly Road, where the houses thinned out and the marsh began to glow under a half moon. He kept the windows half down. The salt air came in. He did not put on music. She asked him about Eleanor. He did not turn his head. She was an architect. She designed the workshop, the whole layout, the light wells. I just keep it running. Adrian was quiet for a long mile, listening to the soft whistle of wind around the door seals. Then she said something she had not said to anyone in 15 years. I didn't want to be CEO. I wanted to work in heritage preservation. My mother said no. Marcus did not respond right away. When he did, it was only, "There's still time." They reached the end of Folly Beach. He pulled the car off the road into the lot where the asphalt gave way to sand. He killed the engine. The Morris Island lighthouse beam swept across the water every 6 seconds. They sat on the hood. Neither of them spoke. The metal was warm from the engine. Adrian had not been on the hood of a car since she was 17 years old, and even then, never one she could not have bought. After a while, Marcus said very quietly, "You don't have to explain that afternoon. I'm not asking." She watched the lighthouse beam pass over the water. "I know," she said. "That's the hard part." A pelican lifted off the dune line and turned south. She watched it go. She thought of her grandmother, of a phrase her grandmother had used once and never explained, that the world only gives you the second chance you are willing to walk back into. She had not understood it at 12. She understood it now. They drove back the slower way, through the streets along the seawall. He did not put on music on the return trip either. The dashboard lights cast a faint amber on the dial of his watch and the line of his jaw. Adrienne did not look at him. She listened to the engine and the wind and her own breathing settling into something steadier than it had been in weeks. He pulled up outside her building on East Bay Street. He did not turn off the engine. He looked at the corner of the lobby light, not at her. "You should pull the third-quarter maintenance reports for the Savannah and Hilton Head properties, specifically the line items routed through outside contractors. Don't say who told you to look." She turned. "What?" He was already moving. He stepped out, opened her door, closed it behind her. He walked around to the driver's side without looking back. The Ford GT pulled away from the curb and turned left at the next intersection, the sound of its engine falling away down the street toward the bridge. Adrian stood on the sidewalk for a long time. She did not go in immediately. She thought about a man who had said almost nothing for 2 hours, and then handed her, on the way out, a thread she would have to pull alone. Upstairs, she did not turn on the lights. She walked to the window and looked out over the rooftops of the historic district, where the church spires were lit from below in soft white. She did not sleep until past 4. She was at her desk by 6. At 6:15 in the morning, Adrian called her chief financial officer at home. She wanted the maintenance ledgers for Savannah, Hilton Head, and Tybee Island on her desk by 9. 3 years deep, line by line. Every outside contractor, every routing number, every invoice scan. Her CFO did not ask questions. He had worked for her grandfather. He had learned not to ask. By 10, she had a pattern. Not enough to indict. Enough to look closer. A single vendor name appearing again and again on small routine entries. Always under $50,000. Always signed by one hand. A few minutes after 10, her front desk called up. "A Miss Camille Beaumont is here from Magnolia K Coffee. She doesn't have an appointment." Adrian asked the desk to send her up. Camille stepped into the office in a gray jacket and clean black slacks. She did not sit. She placed a manila envelope, sealed with a small disc of wax, on the corner of the desk. "I shouldn't be here, but my husband has been dead 2 years. I have nothing left to be afraid of." Adrienne opened the envelope. Inside, a single sheet. A photocopy of an invoice from 3 years earlier, a request to Reeve Coachworks for the purchase of a used Ford GT under the routing instructions of One Linden Coastal Holdings LLC. The signature line was Carter Linden's. Adrian's hand went still on the desk. Camille spoke in a low, careful voice. "My husband, Mateo, worked in Mr. Reeve's legal office before he died. He kept this. Mr. Reeve never used it. He said business was not a reason to break a family. But I thought you should have it. You don't deserve to be lied to. Especially not by a man who calls Mr. Reeve a mechanic in your hearing. Adrian looked up. Why now? Camille held her eyes. Because you stood up too fast that day. Mr. Reeve deserved better than that. And so did you. Adrian thanked her formally, the way her grandmother had thanked the housekeepers when she was a child. Camille nodded once and left. The receptionist later said she walked out as quietly as she had come in. By noon, Adrian had laid the invoice next to the maintenance ledger. The shell company name matched. The exact corporate address matched. The bank routing matched. She called her personal attorney, a woman she had known since law school. She called the 3 independent board members she trusted most, including Eleanor Whitlock Brand, who answered on the first ring and listened for 9 straight minutes without interrupting. By 3 in the afternoon, a quiet internal audit was authorized. The auditors were instructed to bypass Carter entirely and report through general counsel only. Carter, somewhere on the floor above her own, heard whispers and made his move first. He emailed the full board and demanded an emergency session to discuss the chief executive's conflict of interest with a private vendor. He inserted, near the end of the second paragraph, a careful phrase about optics in our current sensitive multicultural climate. He believed he was striking first. He believed the phrase would do half the work for him among the older trustees. He had used similar phrases for 15 years, and they had always worked. That evening, Adrian's phone buzzed once on the corner of her desk. A text from a number she did not recognize. Will you come hear me play piano Friday night? Daddy says you might be busy. Naomi. Adrian closed her laptop. She walked to the window. The sun had gone behind the steeple of Street Phillips, and the rooftops were turning copper. She thought about a small drawing on her passenger seat. She thought about a girl on a stool in a workshop. Swinging her legs, she typed back with her thumb. Slowly. I will be there. I promise. She set the phone down. Friday morning. The 30th floor. The boardroom faced east toward the harbor and the Battery, and the light came in low and hard across the long mahogany table. 8 board members, 3 attorneys, 1 independent auditor. Carter arrived in a charcoal suit with a green silk tie. He smiled at the room as he sat. He opened with confidence. He spoke for 19 minutes. He laid out a case that Adrian had extended preferential treatment to a local vendor, under circumstances inconsistent with the conflict of interest clauses of the Whitlock operating agreement. He named Reeve. He let the room in further rest. Twice in his presentation he used the phrase optics story, his preferred code, watching for the soft nods that had always come before. Adrian did not interrupt. She let him finish. When he sat back, she nodded to her general counsel. The audit binders were distributed, 84 pages each. 3 independent forensic accountants had signed the cover sheet. The numbers were on page 41. Linden Coastal Holdings, LLC. 47 separate disbursements over 3 years. Total $4,712,000, drawn from the maintenance budgets of Savannah, Hilton Head, and Tybee Island, authorized by a single signature. Carter's face shifted in micro-stages. Confidence, calculation, then a controlled paleness around the mouth. He tried to recover. Those were legitimate outside vendor payments. I signed them as COO. Adrian placed the second document on the table. The Reeve invoice. The same shell company name. The same address. The same routing. Marked 3 years prior, signed by Carter personally, for the private purchase of a Ford GT, in his own name. 1 company, she said. Her voice did not rise. 2 uses. 1 to bleed the corporation. 1 to hide a personal asset. Both signed by you. One of Carter's outside counsel set down his pen, stood, and walked quietly out of the room. The chair, an 81-year-old shipping heir named Eleanor Whitlock Brand, asked Carter to step outside. The preliminary vote was taken with him in the corridor. 7-1, his own proxy voting against him, to suspend all positions, freeze executive accounts, and notify the FBI Charleston field office. When the door opened, Carter knew. He turned to Adrian on his way out. He spoke softly, but the acoustics of the room carried. You think a black mechanic can shield you from the Whitlock name? Adrienne did not stand. You never asked him what he did, Carter. That was your problem. And you never saw who he actually was. That was your second problem. That evening, the recital hall at Ashley Hall held 40 families and one grand piano. The lights were the warm yellow of old chandeliers. The program was printed on cream cardstock. Naomi Reeve was the fifth performer. Marcus sat in the third row, second seat from the aisle. The seat beside him, empty. He had kept it empty since they opened the doors. Adrian slid into it 2 minutes before the lights dimmed, straight from a 4-hour press briefing, the collar of her blouse slightly creased. He passed her the program without speaking. Naomi walked out in a white dress and a black ribbon. Claire de Lune. Halfway through the middle passage, her left ring finger brushed a key it should not have. The note shimmered off and resolved. Her eyes flicked down to the third row. She found her father's face. He nodded once. She kept playing. She did not miss another note. The last chord faded. The hall was silent for 1 beat longer than usual before the applause started. Naomi ran down the side aisle, threw her arms around Marcus, then turned in his arms and reached for Adrian's hand. She pulled it down to her cheek. I played that for you. You and Daddy sitting next to each other. That was the right way. Adrian did not cry the way other women cried. Her shoulders moved once. A single line of moisture moved down her cheek and disappeared into the collar of her blouse. Marcus pulled a folded linen handkerchief from his inside pocket, freshly pressed, and laid it across her knee. 10 days. Carter Linden was removed from every Whitlock position by unanimous vote. The FBI Charleston field office opened a federal case. His personal accounts were frozen. The Post and Courier ran a small piece on the business page. Adrian issued a single sentence. The company is cooperating fully with federal investigators. She stepped back from day-to-day operations. She did not resign. She asked the board for a transitional CEO for the next 12 months, while she reset her direction. The board agreed within the hour. Her standing internally and in the market rose. Her mother, after a long silence, called. Constance asked, with unusual care, whether Adrian was eating. Adrian said she was. Her mother did not ask about Marcus. The silence was not the same silence as before. Adrian bought 4 adjoining brick houses on the Cooper River side of the peninsula. 1823 antebellum construction, partially derelict. She put the deeds into a new nonprofit, the Whitlock Heritage Foundation. The first project brief included a chapter on the Gula Geechee ironworkers, whose hand-forged gates had once stood on every block of the old city. She wrote that chapter herself. Marcus offered, in writing, to donate all the wrought ironwork, gates, balcony railings, stair balusters, sconces. He refused payment. The note read only, "Consider this Eleanor's contribution." She would have loved this block. They worked together 3 days a week. They did not call it dating. They ate sandwiches on the front steps and argued about hinge sizes and the thickness of restoration-grade window glass. Slowly, a vocabulary built between them. The vocabulary of 2 people doing one thing well, side by side, without negotiation. 6 months after the boardroom morning, the foundation opened its first restored block. 20 chairs, a wrought iron gate by Reeve Coachworks, a cream ribbon, a small jazz trio on the back lawn. Adrian wore a pale gray dress and low heels. Naomi stood beside her in a white dress, holding Magnolia. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, dark blue shirt buttoned to the collar, no tie. He stood at the back of the crowd. A reporter from Charleston magazine asked Adrian gently about her relationship with Mr. Reeve. Adrian smiled slightly. "We are building the same thing," she said. "Not a family. Not yet, but not nothing either." The reporter wrote it down word for word. After the ribbon, the 3 of them walked east along the waterfront, past the Battery, and stopped, almost by reflex, in front of Magnolia Quay. Camille saw them through the glass and held the door. She walked them to the window table. Cappuccino, double espresso, hot chocolate with extra foam. She inclined her head and walked away. Outside, where 6 months earlier There had been 3 of America's most expensive supercars. There were now only 2 vehicles at the curb. A 1998 Ford pickup, a black Range Rover. Naomi sat between them. She opened her ironwork book and turned to a page marked with a cream ribbon from her bouquet. She pointed at a gate of looping vines and small forged leaves. "I want our gate to look like this." "Can it, Daddy? Can it?" "Adrian." Both leaned forward, their hands met above the page. Adrian's fingers touched the back of Marcus's hand. Neither pulled away. Adrian thought of the blind date 6 months earlier. 11 minutes, 3 supercars she had walked between without looking up. She smiled faintly. Marcus caught it. He did not ask. They went back to the page neither had been looking at, and perhaps that was why they finally found each other.